Hi everyone, this is Mrs. Bustamante. In this video, we're going to be talking about 8.6, which is biodiversity and its importance to kind of an ecosystem, right? So when we're looking at an ecosystem, we want to have diversity because diversity will really cause that ecosystem to be kind of more resilient to change, right? We know that change is always happening in a given situation, right? Everything's in a balance, hopefully, right? But we're going to see fluctuations, peaks and valleys. But if you have lots of diversity in your ecosystem, so you have a diverse ecosystem, and then within that ecosystem, you have species diversity, you have lots of different species, right? And then within those individual species, right, you have genetic diversity in those species, you're going to see an ecosystem, populations, right, even individuals that are more likely to kind of survive natural or artificial changes. Why is that? Well, it kind of makes them more resilient, right? There's more likelihood that they are to survive under some sort of given change. Where if there's not a lot of diversity, maybe you just have one genetic variant, I guess you could say, in a population, right? It's probably not going to be able to bounce back from some sort of dramatic change in the same way that a diverse population would, right? If some will survive, think about natural selection, right? If you select all of them gone, that's not great for your community, right? But if you can have a couple individuals there, that would be ideal. So changes in diversity can either be short-term or long-term structural changes that happen in a community. They can kind of bounce back and recover, see things, or it can change permanently from there on out. When we're talking about ecosystems, there are kind of two things that influence a little bit the diversity. Abiotic factors, which are non-living things, climate, water, nutrients, energy, light, those things. And then biotic factors, plants, animals, fungi, bacteria, right? All that are there. And both of these things influence what we say is ecosystem diversity. When we're talking about abiotic factors, well, we're talking about, are these things available to the species that live there, right? What is the climate like? What kind of organisms can be supported there and be successful in producing offspring, right? Is there water availability? What nutrients are there? And I don't necessarily just mean like food as far as what they eat, but think about like vitamins and minerals, things like that that might be present in the given population or place. I guess land space is probably more accurate there, right? Light, energy, all those things. What's available to the organisms that are trying to survive there? Because that's going to play a role, right, on the diversity, right? Can only one thing survive there? Is it very specific, or is there enough to kind of go around and support multiple different organisms? Biotic factors, living things, they also are going to include diversity, right? So think about our producers, right? They're at the bottom of our energy pyramid typically. They provide food for a lot of organisms, but they also tend to provide habitats, right? Places for populations to kind of hide and survive and camouflage and fit in lots of different ways, right? So they're very important in creating spaces that can support biodiversity as well. Then we have our predators. They're going to keep our prey populations under control. So we don't see too much pressure on one single population of something. And so we can see lots of different things kind of coexist in their specific niche, right, with their specific role and kind of live in happiness, so to speak, if you will. Of course, there's competition, but there can be some balance with it. One type of species that when we're looking at ecosystems and trophic levels in particular is really important is something called a keystone species. And a keystone species plays an especially important role in the community. Really, the community structure kind of depends on them. And we've noticed when a keystone species happens to leave or be removed from the population that we kind of see that population sort of collapse and not be as sustainable and biodiverse as it once was. When we talk about trophic cascades, right, and how things affect one level after another, keystone species have an especially important role if they're removed from the ecosystem. Typically, when we're looking at them, we see that they have less individuals in a population than other things in the community. But that doesn't always have to be the case. But they really provide a nice balance, right? When we see them get removed from a population, we see that balances get really especially thrown off more than they might even normally. One example of a keystone species is actually the sea otter. Yes, here in the Pacific Northwest, and they're really important for kind of helping maintain balance in what we call as our kelp forests in the Pacific Northwest oceans. Another example of keystone species is actually African elephants. Their tusks are used to dig up riverbeds, creating watering holes for many animals. If we think about we're living in the desert, right, having water, access to water is very important for animals. Their dung, which is their feces, their poop, actually provides habitats for insects and helps distribute seeds from one place to another as they leave it behind, if you will. And then feeding behaviors influence the landscape as well, right? When they feed in a place, they're going to have tree removal, shrubs provide pathways for other animals, and even their pathway that they lead kind of can guide other animals from one way to another because they're a herd, they travel all together, right? And they're going to leave kind of a really big trail there. So if we see that African elephants are no longer in a population, the other organisms in the population get really affected by this, typically not in a positive way overall. So I hope this was helpful. I hope you understand the importance of biodiversity in creating a stable community and the factors that can go into creating a biodiverse or influencing a biodiverse community. Hope you have a great day.